This week on Political Capital, with approval of Congress at an all-time low, will Republicans hold their majority in the House? We asked Congressman Pete Sessions, chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee. And on the last word, Newt Gingrich is wooing conservatives, but hitting some roadblocks. We begin the show with Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas, chairman of the National Republican House Campaign Committee. Thank you for joining us in the studio, Mr. Chairman. Let's start with the payroll tax. It looks like Congress is going to get through an omnibus spending bill before you go home for Christmas, but the payroll tax is still hanging out there with a lot of things on it. Will you get a payroll tax extension, or will it be a short 2-month extension or nothing?
I think what's going to have to be is a realistic approach for us to understand that we need to do something for the American people. Their take-home pay is very important. The economics of employment are not working by the president, and House Republicans want to make sure.
So what's going to happen?
We're going to have to find a way to cut a deal, as you know, between the Republican ideas and the president's ideas.
So you think there'll be a compromise? Will it be long-term or short-term?
I think it will be short-term.
Short-term. Let me ask you this, though. You just, back in September, you called the payroll tax a horrible idea and said your candidates would have no difficulty explaining why they want the tax to expire, the tax holiday. Why they change their mind?
Well, I didn't change my mind. It is a bad idea. But when you combine that with something else, for instance, when we voted to the extension of the tax cuts,
right.
When you mirror that with something that's a job stimulus, an economic growth package, then it's a good deal.
So what does it have to have in it?
Now's the wrong time to have the American worker take home less pay.
So what has to go in it as part of a deal?
Well, I think.
Well, I mean, what's the bottom line? Not what you desire, but what's the bottom line?
Job growth. How about Keystone Pipeline?
So you won't support anything that doesn't have Keystone Pipeline?
I won't support something that does not show job growth and the development.
Could you support something that doesn't have Keystone Pipeline in it?
I'll support something that's about job growth. Yeah. That's what we need. We need jobs in this country.
So Keystone Pipeline is not the all litmus test.
It may not be, but we're paying more in unemployment compensation than we're receiving revenue from employers, and that is a bad sign.
Let's
for
put
America.
on your campaign hat for a minute. The Democrats, through October, House Democrats are outraising the Republicans. Not by much, 3.4 million or something. The party that doesn't control the House almost never outraises the incumbent party. Why are they doing so much better?
Let's give credit to Nancy Pelosi. Right. She is out all over this country talking to the left wing of this country. They love her. She used to be before she was a member of Congress, the national finance chairman for the Democrat campaign committee. She knows where her strike zone is.
So why isn't John Boehner or Kevin McCarthy talking to the right wing of the Republican Party?
Why is John Boehner out talking every weekend and raising money? John is doing that.
But he's not doing as well as Nancy Pelosi.
It's hard to do it full time. That's what Nancy's doing.
Okay.
We're trying to, with John Boehner and Eric Cantor, we're trying to run the House of Representatives from a perspective of trying to make sure we're about regular order, getting good legislation, talking to people, and making sure that we're working with this White House on things that are good.
But I checked, there are challengers, Democratic challengers, Arizona, New York, New Hampshire. They're outraising Republican incumbents. That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
It is not unusual because we've spent a lot of time in Washington focusing on trying to grow the economy. We'll be just fine. We're a couple million behind. You watch us.
Okay. Your finance chairman, Vern Buchanan of Florida, is under federal investigation for alleged campaign violations. Nothing proved and nothing charged even. The House Ethics Committee is looking at him too. Should he step aside until this is resolved?
Vern Buchanan has been forthright and brought the information to the committee and to the Department of Justice himself. Gave the information to them. I have looked at this in detail. Who knows what will eventually turn up?
But it's okay.
I have confidence in Vern Buchanan. He is not the issue. The issue is the ability to resolve quickly what he brought to the committee and to the Department of Justice. He's the one that provided the information, by the way, publicly about this.
Okay.
He's being forthright, and I'm very proud of Vern.
Let me ask you about the Republican brand name. It was pretty darn good in October and November of 2010. It has really dropped in every single poll. NBC, Pew, CBS, I mean, I've looked at all of them, and the Republican brand name has dropped considerably. It's in worse shape than the Democratic brand name. Why, and does it matter?
The brand name of Republican is drawing a lot of attention and focus because of our presidential candidates who are talking. Many times they're talking about big, new, great ideas. Many times they're attacking each other. I think the American people...
And that's why the brand name is gone down.
I think across the country, you know, this opportunity to support our ideas is really helping, but the opportunity to attack each other, we've had a candidate up for 2 or 3 weeks and then a candidate down for 2 or 3 weeks. We'll get our footing real quickly.
When you look at your House candidates, I know you're neutral in the presidential race, does it matter who the nominee is? Does one candidate conceivably help down ticket more than the other or hurt down ticket more?
I think what matters is that we get a candidate that is for growing our economy, making sure that we tame this Washington spending, and perhaps most of all, listening to the American people on goals for our generation that we can achieve. And I think the president is in trouble when we get a good Republican who can tout
and you don't see
how we will move our economy.
And you don't see any difference, really, as far as being able to do that among the major contenders?
I think our major contenders right now, Newt Gingrich understands exactly how to get this done, and so does Mitt Romney. They've both proven it, and Mitt Romney grew a lot of jobs.
Let me ask you this. The front runner in polls is Newt Gingrich. The Republicans also say that they are the party of family values. Indeed, you're a member of the Values Action Team in the House. Newt Gingrich's personal past, 2 divorces, acknowledged adultery, not paying child support. Does that make it hard to have a standard bearer of a party claiming to be the party of family values?
If you look at Newt and his service to this great nation and his responsibilities that he has had over the period of time, I think Newt, if you look at him in aggregate or in the substance behind him, he deeply believes in the value of the American people, our family value system, which is directly related to growing jobs and having families be responsible for their own problems.
Do you think that Newt Gingrich personifies family values?
You know, what I would say is that Newt Gingrich is going to go sell himself across the country, and if he effectively does that, he can become our nominee.
And the past doesn't matter?
I think all pasts matter, but what I do think it's where we're going to head and where we're going to grow, and whether it's Jack Kennedy or Bill Clinton or others, personal lives do come into play, and people do judge you for that. Our country needs someone who can lead and lead effectively to the betterment of the American dream, and Newt Gingrich is pretty good at that.
Steve Israel, your counterpart, was on this show last week, and he said the Democrats will pick up at least 20 House seats, and it'll be nip and tuck as to whether it's 25.
The day before last year's election, the Democrats were touting they were going to keep the majority.
Right.
I look at the polling, I see it just as much as Steve does. They're in trouble. Republicans will hold the House, 0 chance we're going to lose it.
Okay, he gave me his prediction. Will you actually gain seats, or will you lose just a few?
I've been saying for quite some time publicly, plus 16. We're going to pick up seats across this country. If you look at where we are in Illinois, if you look where we are in North Carolina, if you look at where we are in Arkansas and Oklahoma, we're picking up those incumbent seats, and watch us in Utah.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Welcome back. Romney and Gingrich sharpened their attacks on each other this week. Is it helping either? Bloomberg News White House correspondent Hans Nichols and political reporter Julie Davis join me now. Julie, there was a debate on Thursday night. It was supposed to be Ali versus Frazier, Romney versus Gingrich, except Romney sort of was a bystander, and the others attacked Gingrich.
Well, Romney got to do what he has liked to do for most of this year, which is to really stay above the fray. He didn't go after Gingrich personally. He didn't even go after him on substance, really. He left that task to the other Republican candidates in the race, who really do have an interest in stopping Gingrich now before the dynamics of the race spin out of their control and they're gone, and they're out of contention. This was Gingrich and Romney are really trying hard to define each other, but this was an opportunity for Romney to kind of let his other opponents take the lead on that.
And Michelle Bachmann certainly joined that.
Michelle Bachmann did, and Ron Paul did, and so he got that job was accomplished without him having to kind of stoop into the fray.
After having a rough couple weeks, Romney has had at least a good couple days. He got Nikki Haley's endorsement from South Carolina. Maybe there's a little bit of a Romney comeback.
Well, he's definitely in a stage now where it's the last push up until Iowa. He's waffled on whether he's really trying to win Iowa or not, but he clearly wants to do well, and he has to do very well and win New Hampshire in order to have the kind of January that he needs to have. So the Haley endorsement helps because she is a heroine of the Tea Party, and he needs to shore up his kind of credibility with the right and the conservative voters. So I think that helps him, but it remains to be seen whether voters will, as they haven't quite done to date, really embrace him and feel enthusiastic about voting for him.
And how about Gingrich? He's saying he's going to stay positive. When he's getting attacked, it's pretty hard to stay positive, isn't it?
It is, and he faces kind of a challenge here because he has to answer the attacks. He can't let his opponents define him as, you know, an influence peddler and remind everyone of how erratic he was when he was Speaker of the House without answering those things. But at the same time, the biggest knock against him from the establishment and also from voters who you talk to on the trail is, can he be steady enough? Can he be presidential enough? Is he fit for this office? So he has to be careful not to look like he's stooping, you know, too far into the muck.
Well, he had some good moments out in Iowa, but the Freddie Mac continues to be deviling. You in New Hampshire spent a little bit of time with Ron Paul. Tell us about it.
Well, this is a campaign that is unlike any of the other Republican campaigns. I've spent time with most of the other candidates, but his events, his supporters, it's a totally different universe. I was at a rally with a town hall with him on Tuesday night, and the biggest applause line was when Ron Paul said that I am going to protect your right to drink raw milk whenever you like. I mean, this is an election about the economy. This is about debt and deficit and taxes and spending, and his supporters got the most enthusiasm out of that raw milk line. And what it really shows you is that he has tapped into this very strong undercurrent of, you know, conservative principles advocating people, libertarians who really feel like their issues aren't being addressed. They feel like the government is way out of control, and they almost see him as kind of like an oracle figure.
And it includes old, young.
Old, young, a lot of young, but there are a lot of middle-aged and older people who just feel like these issues are not getting addressed, and he's the only one who's making any sense. But he doesn't sound anything like the rest of the candidates.
He could win the Iowa caucuses. Who knows? Hans, speaking of politics, the White House thought they were winning the payroll tax fight. Yeah, not quite so clear.
They brought this brinksmanship argument forward in terms of shutting down the government because they wanted to get the tax bill done before they have some sort of final deal on the spending package. So for a White House that internally thinks they've actually done pretty well the past 2 months in staying on the jobs issue, staying focused on taxes, they lost this week a little bit. They might be able to rescue it if they get some 11th hour deal, but then you could end up having another brinksmanship conversation.
Let's talk about the economy generally. A little bit more upbeat mood in the White House about...
Yeah, they expect 3% for the fourth quarter, but let's put this in context, right? 3% is not great for the last quarter of a year before a presidential campaign. It's still a half a point lower than what Goldman expects, so they're not overly excited. Europe's still off in the distance, and they're not going to have gangbuster growth when it matters, which is Q1, 2, 3, and 4 of 2012.
What really matters, what's essential for them, is direction. Will they get, and then the jobless rate is the key barometer, will they get at least mild directional improvement?
Unclear. You know, if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be a political reporter on the economy.
Yeah, you would.
Well, look, the consensus forecast is going to go down a little bit in the beginning of the year, then creep up. It's not going to be anywhere near what Reagan had, which was 7.6% growth in the end. It won't be anywhere close to that.
The Democratic fat cats came to town this week. What were they told by the Obama folks?
It was hard to get a table at Bobby Van's Monday night. That's where Bill Burton's group had his holiday party, so he could talk to all those fat cats. Look, all the big donors were brought in to talk to the Obama campaign, get an update. They were told a couple things. One, the White House thinks they've preserved a lot of different paths to 270. So different ways you can get there by this state, that state. Unclear if that really matters at this stage. More it's the atmospherics. And the other thing they were told is, look, expect a long primary on the Republican side, maybe into June, and it's very good for us. A lot of sitting back, laughing, and watching at what's going on in the Republican primary.
President's speech at Fort Bragg on the end of the war in Iraq, it didn't quite sound like Senator Obama, the great war critic of 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, he didn't call it a dumb war. He had to walk a very fine line and telling these troops that they can leave with their heads held high and without kind of reverting to this criticism that really animated his presidency. He met with the last fallen soldier in Iraq when he was down there met with the family of the fallen soldier. All presidents from Lincoln onwards have met with the wounded, met with the fallen soldier. It affects them all, but this president has, like Bush before him, gone out and tried to talk to these families and get a sense for what's going on there. Pretty poignant moment.
Something else that was a bit different, there was a lot of talk earlier about they weren't going to do any bragging about Osama bin Laden. They're bragging now.
Well, bin Laden got the biggest applause line at that speech.
You don't mean bin Laden got it.
When the president mentioned bin Laden, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Look, when this is the third time in a week the president has mentioned bin Laden, we thought that this might be a September surprise, something they rolled out closer to the election. It's clear they're going to talk about it all year and let the Republicans know don't challenge this president on foreign policy. He's a pretty impeccable credentials, and as the president has said, ask 22 of the 30. Unsaid on that is that how you can ask the 22 of 30 al-Qaeda leaders if they're no longer around.
Including bin Laden is kind of hard to ask.
Right. Source close to bin Laden, be tough to find that.
Well, it's I suppose it ought to be a plus, and it is. Hey, thank you, Julie Davis. Thank you, Hans Nichols. Welcome back. We'll go to Kate and Margaret in a moment, but first, Iran's capture of a U.S. drone is just the latest in a series of incidents that has escalated tensions in that region. Bloomberg's Middle East correspondent, Lara Setrakian, joins me from Dubai. Lara, the Iranians got the American drone, but the real story is whether they're going to get a bomb. How close are they?
Well, they're on the cusp of a major escalation, Al. They're saying they're going to enrich uranium faster at the Fordo plant. That is a hardened, deep underground facility. That's not something Washington wants to see. It's making everyone in this region very nervous. Analysts say it brings them faster to having weapons-grade uranium.
So prospects of war more imminent, likely?
Well, that's the mood here. Everyone talks about it as if it's a matter of when, not if. And you see this. I've been here for years, and periodically these talks, this rhetoric escalates. Everyone gets nervous about a conflict, then the nerves calm down. But every time we go through that cycle, Iran's nuclear clock keeps ticking. We get closer to potential breakout capacity, and that changes the calculus here in terms of whether a conflict, even though disastrous, might be worth it.
And we're talking about, when we say conflict, we're talking about the Israelis trying to take out some of the Iranian nuclear facilities, correct?
Whoever it might be. The Arab Gulf could support that kind of an action from the United States, certainly. If it happens, it's going to throw this entire neighborhood into pandemonium. The cards that Iran holds, very, very powerful when it comes to what the Gulf Arabs see as a fifth column in their own countries, potential activation of cells here. Hezbollah, still strategic allies in Syria, potentially Iraq. That's what it looks like from here, and that's what people expect to see really inflamed by a potential war.
Well, how does the chaos in Syria affect what the Iranians can or cannot do, and what's going to happen?
Well, it certainly hurts Iran. They have to spend resources, energy, trying to keep Bashar al-Assad in power. It also makes them much more nervous. It's become really the bleeding wound of their alliance from Iran to Syria to Hezbollah. So as they put out that fire, they're very concerned. They want to project strength. That has Iran in a very unpredictable place, but really trying to look tough to the whole world.
Okay, Lara Setrakian, we'll be back to you. Thank you very, very much. Let me turn to Kate and Margaret now. Kate, the great Bill Buckley's National Review, the home of Kate O'Byrne, tells conservatives say no to Newt. What's the backstory?
Al, the only backstory I'm aware of is the one alleged by some of Newt Gingrich's angrier supporters. But in fact, National Review is not part of some conspiracy. There's no hidden motives. National Review has not abandoned conservatism. I think an editorial, a very clear editorial, makes the case that Newt Gingrich's nomination would not serve the cause of conservatism for all of his undeniable strengths and talents, and they're very real. They're not well suited for the presidency, just as they weren't well suited for being speaker. And because the new Newt really resembles the old Newt in the lack of discipline and the grandiosity, in a really high-stakes election, National Review argues it ought to be a referendum on Barack Obama. And if the Newt we know, still on display, is the nominee, it will be an election about Newt Gingrich.
Margaret, your take on that in the debate?
It is the most satisfying editorial in that it brings together every stray thought you've had about Newt Gingrich into one big can of worms. The old, the new is all put together. And there's to go to another publication, there's a story in the New York Times which has Newt's health care record, in which he's representing all of the groups that are against the Republicans' view on health care and are pro-Obama, and doing it for an awful lot of money.
Well, to be parochial, Bloomberg had a story about Freddie Mac that was an awful lot of money, too, and that's just another part
right,
of this case.
1.6.
Right. Let's talk about somebody else. Ron Paul, 79 years old, sort of thought of as a crank. He's got a big following.
Oh, it's huge and growing. He has one thing that's missing and that people long for is he is authentic, cranky though he be, right, and yelling about having the right to drink raw milk. But you know, he has some very common sense things. And Romney should send him a partridge in a pear tree for Christmas because he's going to save Romney and Obama. In Iowa.
He also produced some of the best ads I have ever seen in a political campaign.
They're funny, they're cogent.
Who would have guessed that? And they're tough, too, on Gingrich. Your take on the Paul phenomenon?
Well, Ron Paul has some of the most committed supporters, which of course really matters, particularly in Iowa.
Including young people.
Yeah, absolutely. So he definitely has a floor because of those incredibly committed supporters. I think his ceiling sinks every time the topic of conversation is foreign policy.
Right.
That totally limits him from reaching beyond those enthusiastic supporters. But he's so effective in his charges at the moment, specifically against Newt Gingrich, about influence peddling, that I think he's going to have a real effect in Iowa in that respect.
As was Bachmann last night in the debate on Thursday.
Right, I agree. I saw those two ads. The one ad's an anti-Gingrich ad. It's the toughest negative ad I've ever seen. It's about 1 minute and 51 seconds where they break it up into 30 seconds. And the other one is this positive ad about dogs and shih tzus.
With the little dog.
It's really, who would have thought that Ron Paul would have had the most effective commercials? All right, guys, we will be back for our Christmas week show next week, and I hope you'll join us. We'll see you again next week.
Political Capital is a production of Bloomberg Television.